think conviction in how you personally have come to the strategy or the approach that you're going to take, having conviction in that will help you when times get tough or things get turbulent. You can always just come back to your kind of thesis about how you're going to move through this space.
GM. My name is Boona, and you're tuning in to an episode of the Boonified Experience podcast. This is a Web3 show that curates the stories of artists, collectors, and true visionaries, pushing the boundaries of technology to create a brighter future for all. This podcast is conversational by nature and is designed in such a way to make you, the listener, feel like you're a part of two friends vibing over a good cup of coffee. That was May talking about the power of having conviction in yourself. For those of you on video, you'll see that I'm recording this live from the Mayverse. And that is the best way I can describe. If you don't know what the Mayverse is, I'll go ahead and start by just describing the way I view May's art. May is a 3D artist based out of Australia who makes fictive landscapes, very squishy landscapes that are meant to be super comfy, comfortable, of places that don't really exist, but we'd really, really like it if they did. I had such a great time with May. Some of the main topics we chatted through were experience surrounding financial markets, how she looks at an artist's supply, strategy and focus during the bear. This is a topic that both of us riff on a little bit. What collectibles we both want to own and why. And lastly, we rounded off with May's physical art collection, and she gives us a little bit of a peek of some of the inspiration that drives a lot of her work today. Y'all, I am super stoked for you to hear my conversation with May. Let's go ahead and get started with the show. GM, May, how are you?
GM, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's I can feel like I can say this to you because it's morning time where you're at.
Yeah, you've got me early in the morning this time, so it works well.
Yeah, last time we had a chat, it was like, I don't know, it was like 9:30 I think at night for me on like a Saturday. So I was, it felt a little awkward saying that. I'm not gonna lie.
But we went really late because I think we were meant to start at 12 my time, midday my time. And by the time we actually started recording, it was 1. And you went to get midnight breakfast after.
I did. That's right. You remember that. It was really good. Yeah. Breakfast taquitos. Yeah.
I was really jealous.
If you ever come to Texas, it's a Texas thing only, like where I went. So it's not just over to the States. It's like a Texas thing specific. It'll change your life. It'll absolutely change your life.
I'll put it on my Texas bucket list.
Yeah, I mean, and so here's what you could even come down here, like, because we do have South by Southwest, so there might be like a couple art events, because there was this past year that I went. So, and it was like kind of like ragtag, and it was like, I guess you could say decentralized. It was very kind of like disorganized and, kind of out in the outskirts of the main event, but it was really fun. It was like my first experience of like getting to like meet people that I shit posted with on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's like right in my backyard. So it's like, if you do need like a business excuse, like, or to come here, like, that's it. And it's in March.
Perfect.
So yeah.
I was trying to think of March. What month was NFT NYC? June. Okay, can I swing being there for 3 months? Maybe.
That's the
question. I was going to come in December this year because my partner is from California and he hasn't been to see his family in a couple of years, and so we were going to do Christmas there. But when we went to book, like, we'd kept an eye on the prices for flights, and it was like $2,500, $3,000 return.
Oh wow!
When we went to book them, it was $10 per person. So it was going to cost us, like...
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't think we're going to come. But I'm hoping to get there sort of mid-ish next year, just because I think it will be a little bit cheaper. We definitely need to go and see his family. And, yeah, I think if I can time it well, I'll be able to make it to at least one event where I'm going to meet some of my friends.
I'm telling, I encourage you. I think we chatted about this last time as well. Like, I think it was offline, but like, I encourage you to do that at least once, because it's like I regretted doing it until like I got to the event. Like I was like my head was full of regret because like it was very last minute and I spent like way more than I intended on spending on like travel and hotel.
That's
But
right.
like once I went to like my first event, it was like, okay, like this is all good. This is totally worth it. Like it was worth being able to do this because I mean, as great as it is, like as great as like the community and the connection we have on the internet is, there's just nothing like an in-person event. You know, like there's just you can't beat it.
Yeah.
Even the introverts loved it, right? Kath, you know, like even though she was overwhelmed a lot of it, like, you know, you could tell that she was enjoying it.
Yeah, I think I'd be the same. I think I'd find it a lot, but it would be really beautiful. Last year, Christian, No Creative, sent me, like he was running around doing all this fun shit, and as he ran into people that I knew and like that he knew that I would want to be able to meet, he was like taking photos with them and little videos and stuff and sending them to me. So every morning I'd wake up to just these like beautiful little updates of what was going on and what he was doing while he was there. And it made me really, I put a lot of value in human connection, I think. And you're right, I agree. It's one thing through a screen and it's a whole other thing in person.
Right. I mean, I know you like that, and that's where a lot of this is built. And I think one thing that like really clicked with me is that I don't think this community would have really been built like if we had not been in lockdown. You know, I don't think it would have been this tight of a community that you know, does that make sense? Where it's like I feel like we needed this to happen to like forge these really strong internet connections, and then the in-person event was like what brought a lot of this to life. I don't know. That's just my take on it.
I love that. I wasn't here for, like, I came September 2021, and so I'm not sure, I can't think where the world really was in terms of COVID at that point, but I know for us, it was not really, we weren't really in the thick of it still, I guess. So I had never considered how much of a factor that probably was in forging the first days of, and not the very first days, I guess, but like when it was like 2019, end of 2019, right? It started COVID.
Yeah, well, COVID was like no, it was beginning of 2020. But what we were talking about actually, there was actually something I'm curious about. You know, as an artist, like when you came in, Peak Wagme, like Insta sales, like crazy, like it's just everything's up only, and now we're in this like, now we're in the opposite of that.
Sideways at best only.
Sideways at best only. Yeah, I like it. Like how, I don't want to say how does it make you feel, because like that's an obvious question, but how, like, have you adjusted any sort of like strategy? Was there anything that like you learned from the bull that like you kind of like had to undo during the bear, or like what's kind of been like your game plan with this? Have you thought about that?
Okay, first, I don't think that it's an obvious answer. I think there's pockets of people who will have similar approaches to something like this, but it's maybe not always obvious which pocket those people fit into. For me, I don't know how much of my personality type this is, or if it was the fact that I've been in financial markets for a long time, and so I had maybe some tempered expectations, but the whole time I was like, okay, this up-only thing is not sustainable. Like, and I had been I'd been doing a lot of research independently of Web3 of, I guess, the economic and political circumstances that we were in at that time. And I have been saying, I thought it was going to happen in October of last year, and so I kind of preached to everyone that they needed to like get ready for October last year. And then obviously October last year was like a massive green candle instead of the red one that I'd been talking about. But I wasn't wrong. I was just early.
See what you did there.
So yeah, I think I had such expectations from day one that even if it went well, you know, markets change. And like I said to you before, I, as a person, as a creator, will change. And so it's not always going to be a steep or a steady incline, this journey for anyone. I think it's always going to have external factors influence it. It's always going to have intrinsic factors that are going to influence it. And yeah, I think I just tempered my expectations through knowledge of the situation globally.
Yeah.
And also the fact that I'd been in, you know, it wasn't my first bear cycle. I'd been in a crypto bear cycle before that. I just put everything down and walked away, and I came back a couple of years later and I left my money in all the wrong things. But yeah, I think it just helped to not have that high expectation that things were gonna just, you know, continue on like a up only.
And see, I have never. So last time we were in even just a bear market in a recession, you could just call it a bear market in the world, was like in, you know, like when Bitcoin was surfaced, like, you know, like around the 2010 era. That was not like, I was still not in control. Like I didn't have to worry about it. You know, so it's like I had never I think it's safe for me to say, like, I had never technically been in any sort of a recession or a downturn of a market. I never really experienced the effects of that. And I noticed my parents would talk about it, but I noticed that nothing during like my day-to-day life had ever changed. You know, like it was always the same. And like my parents, you know, probably worked really hard to like make it that way, to where I was left relatively unaffected. So for me, this has been super interesting. Like even as I've been on my own, like I've only known up only. I've only known a good economy. I've only known like, and even before, I'm just talking, even before I got into the NFT and crypto space, like it was just, it was always like a healthy growth market, you know? And I think that's partially why I told you earlier that I was like willfully ignorant to like there being an opposite side to this, because if I never experienced it, like if I never had to deal with it, then why would I ever think it exists? You know, and people have been talking about it. People have been looked up to it, been talking about it for a long time. But I just, again, it was I was just willfully ignorant to a lot of this. So for me, it was I had no experience in it, and there was a thread. It wasn't even a thread. It was just a single tweet, believe it or not, from 6529, and it was talking about like how a lot of people that make it in crypto, it's like it takes a good 2 to 4 cycles, you know, for you to like really figure it out. And if you can like survive, you know, through the first like couple, it actually gets a lot easier to like understand how to like really make it. I don't know. It just, I wanted to share that because it helped my perspective on things. Like I say I have a long-term perspective, and then something like this happens, and then I'm just immediately default to short-term like panic and chaos and like, what the fuck is happening right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's easier said than done to, you know, there's a lot of things that you can hold all the theory about and know how you are supposed to respond in a certain situation. It's like there being a fire and you completely forgetting that stop, drop, and roll is a thing. You know what I mean? Like all the theory just goes out the window and you're like, okay. And I don't know if I can even say that I survived a cycle, because no, I didn't sell everything the first time it happened, but I put it down and I walked away and I was like, oh, that, you know, that's over. And it wasn't until a couple of years later when I realized that it hadn't died that I picked everything back up. Whereas if I was smart at that time, I would have been buying instead of having put it down and walked away. But it was a good learning experience for sure.
Right, but it's like, how would you have known? You know, like that to me, it's like, to me, like I think I still look at that as almost like a survival, because you still, even though they weren't in the right things, you still kept, there was probably still some belief that you had in this, whereas like, okay, if this does continue, it may not be that strong, but I don't know. I feel like that kind of teaches you the same lesson, is what I'm really trying to say, is that, you know.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, it's all the same shit.
Yeah. But I think I think the only or I guess the reason that there's people that became like, you know, that had life-changing events through that cycle, but that I mean accumulated a stupid amount of whatever it was that accumulated, and it came good for them, opposed to me is like I think I had belief in the fact that this was obviously and you know, it's 2016, 2017. We'd had 5 or 6 years of research and building, and a reasonable amount of people that were taking this community really seriously, that, you know, you had to go looking for them, but it was quite easy to find them.
Right.
But I think if I had done more research and realized the long-term impact of what could be built, because, you know, 2017, I could have, had I kept digging, stumbled across Punk to a 2017, right?
I'm
or
not.
2019.
I believe it was 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sure that I could have like stumbled upon. I have heard Ayla speak about this a couple of times. Like, she kind of always had this thing in her head of like, how can I make this happen? And then she came across NFTs, and she was like, this is the thing I've been trying to make happen.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool. So yeah, I think, I don't know, it's a good learning experience in a lot of ways. I think for a lot of the people who we've seen come and go in this cycle from the NFT market, it's going to be their first cycle. It's not even going to be their first cycle in NFTs. It's going to be their first cycle for crypto or any financial market. I think it's pretty natural to like put it down and walk away.
Yeah. Going back to like originally where I had started with this story is that like it's very confusing for someone who's been. It's confusing, but it's also very liberating to kind of be like willfully ignorant to how a lot of these markets worked. And then like, this is the time that I'm actually learning about everything, and where there's new financial models that are in play. I don't have to unlearn any bullshit that, you know, doesn't work, or like whatever the case may be. So it's like, it's overwhelming that there's all these financial tools, both in fiat and in crypto and with NFTs and with all these other things. But it's also very like nice to know that I don't necessarily have to learn all of the old ways to figure out the new ways. You know, it obviously helps, but, you know, I don't have to unlearn any old things to like have an open mind and to have a new experience, and to like, I guess, you know, have a better chance at making like generational wealth here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we've got a lot of people who, like, we're really blessed to have a lot of people in this community who have giga brains. Like, the fact that we have someone like Punk 6529 and you know, people like Dees and Exler and all these people who write these fantastic, really well thought out threads that are informational and educational and really easy to swallow. Like, they're not given in giga brain language a lot of the time. They're given in like, you know, anyone can read it and just level up a little bit in terms of their knowledge of markets, or how the world works, or how humans work. 6529 kind of touches on a bit of everything, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, we're really lucky to have people who are so knowledgeable and are so willing to share that knowledge, I think.
For real. And you know what's really interesting is that I actually bought, so actually how I met Dees was I bought one of his fractionalized, it's like when he fractionalized his hoodie pipe punk on fractional, and I bought into that, and that was like my first like experience with Dees. And I'll tell you, like, it was really interesting. I actually used that as my PFP for a while, because there was like this weird thought experiment, this weird kind of like experiment. I'm like, well, I don't really own the whole thing, but I do own a piece of it. So why can't I do that? You know, like why can't I? And I'll tell you, the difference in the way I tweeted and the way I carried myself on Twitter was so much different when I had a punk as my profile picture versus another, like, just whatever PFP I had at the time. And I thought that was like super interesting.
That is, from a psychological perspective, fascinating.
It is. Yeah. Like, and I'm like, so really interestingly enough, this was also when I had just like dip my toes into podcasting in the space, and it was all kind of like really new, and I was like, is this the right thing? What if punk owners find out that like this is just a fractional, and am I gonna like, I was like, you know what though, like this is all a fucking experiment. I'm gonna try this for like 2 to 3 weeks, and we're just gonna see how this goes. Like I genuinely cared about what I wanted to say, and like I didn't feel like an idiot for saying it. And there was a lot of people that like gained a lot from what I had said, and it was where like kind of like I got some of my start. So, but then after about 3 weeks or a month, I was like, I can't. It just didn't feel right to do it anymore. I thought that was like a really interesting experiment, and you notice a lot of people that like tweet some really good stuff. Like a good chunk of them, you know, not all of them, but like a good chunk are punks. So you get like Art Pleb and like 6529 and 4156 and D's and like all these, you know, a lot of people when they're sharing from a punk account, I feel like there's something
a reputation. There's a
yes.
It comes back to the digital identity thing, but I understand what you're saying. It's there's not expectations, but there's a reputation that comes with that, either that PFP or having a name that is associated with one, or I guess people just knowing that you have one. Because you're right. I think especially people who've been holding one for a significant period of time. There's people who fell into it and got lucky. I came across one the other day who'd minted it like a bunch and then put them down and walked away, and came back to this and was like, oh my God. But I wonder if those, to your point, I wonder if the people who have, put punks down, walked away, come back with them a little bit later on, obviously as they integrate into the community, if they choose to, it would become noticeable, I suppose, to them that people who hold that sort of reputation that's associated with owning a punk would have those. Like, do you think those expectations feel put upon people? Did you feel like people expected that of you when you were depicting yourself that way? Or do you feel like the confidence of being associated with it just kind of came through you?
I don't think it was one or the other, but I think it was more the latter. I think it was more of like, it's almost like I felt like I had to be a responsible steward of the space. That's really what it felt like. So when you look at that statement, it's like a lot of it was I had the confidence to do that, and it helped me overcome a lot of challenges to speak my mind in a way that like I really wanted to. But it also, again, because I came in here with like, I was just super giga bullish on like everything that was happening here, and I like genuinely, I'm like, this is something real here. Like this is a really great opportunity that we have to like make a really big difference in changing the narrative. And so I was like, it was a little bit of both, but I think if I had to like put an exact number to it, if I had to just like estimate, it was probably like an 80-20 of like, I just felt like I needed to be a good steward, and it was 20% of like, I felt like it was 20% may have been pressure from other people, I
feel like if being a responsible steward of this space and everything that it represents is the obligation that people who have high-end PFPs like that feel. And actually, I'll rephrase that to maybe just say punks, because some apes clearly carry that, but I feel it's significantly less common in that community than it is in the punk community.
It is. And there was a point in time where I wanted to own an ape. That time is not now. That window passed. Like if I, like the goal for me is a punk. Like that to me is like become the only goal. And like obviously I love doodles. I just think the art's like cute as hell, and like it's super like comfy and like kid. I love doodles. It makes me feel like a kid. Like I fucking love doodles. So it's like, I mean, like if I were to own any two, if I had to choose, like punks obviously is like, if I had to choose one, it would be punks. But if I chose two, it would be punks and doodles. But I think those two like represent a really good part of like my personality. It's like there's part of me that enjoys having like being the steward and being the lead, and like really like being confident and sharing some thoughts to help propel something forward I believe in. But then there's also like this like like big resistance of like being an adult and me just constantly wanting to be a kid like my entire life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I feel like it's like I feel like it's like this really good like
it's a good balance.
It
Yeah,
is punks and doodles, right? Like
I think if I had to choose any two like high end, if we're not gonna say PSP only, but if I have to choose two really high end collection pieces, I'm getting a ringer and I'm getting a Fidenza.
Solid. Yeah, solid. I mean, I can't argue with it. Do you have a, I'm curious, do you have a ringer picked out, or is it just any ringer?
I don't have one picked out, and I don't have a Fidenza picked out either. Because look, for me to have that much money to spare, feels like a bit of a pipe dream, but I feel relatively confident that one day I'll at least be able to have one of those. Grant has been just slowly amassing this collection of like, he's got his Fidenza now, he's got a squiggle, he's got some really like, he's got some very cool pieces, and he did a decker the other day, and I was looking through that, and then I was looking through his collection, and I was like, man, it's a, you know, you kind of, there are expectations that we place on people who have certain things. It comes with a reputation, it comes with a certain, like if someone collected a piece from me or started an auction or something like that, and I went and looked at their, you know, I've never heard of them before, and I go and look at their collection, and it's like 10 Fidenzas, couple of ringers, like, you're going to freak out.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting, and to see as well, like the different choices that people make when they get to a level where they can buy kind of whatever they feel like buying. I think it's very interesting to see the choices that those people make.
I think it is too, and I didn't even think about it from the artist perspective of like, if this person collects my piece, then like what, like then looking at their collection and be like, okay, what else do they collect? And like having that, I think that there's a, like, as much as we laugh about it at times about like having these like digital identities come with like carrying some weight, like it really does. And the reality is that like this isn't the first time humans have done that. Like if you look at someone that has a Rolex, like there's probably an expectation that you have of them. If you look at someone who's carrying a Gucci handbag or like whatever the, you know, whatever the case may be, or a designer car, or there's always an expectation that we kind of place on them as humans. There's always this like immediate judgment of like, hey, okay, this person can afford this. This means X, Y, and Z of their personality, you know?
Yeah, about them. And I think there's been two stages of this for me being in this community. And the first stage was that I had these people on a pedestal. And I think that's not so much healthy, but I do think it's natural. And the second stage is just, it's, I would still freak out if someone who had an insane collection that I'd never heard of before came out of nowhere and said, hey, I like or I want your art. But in a way that it's like, this person can literally have whatever they want to have, and they want a piece of me. Like that's the, and that can really be applied to even the people who can't just go out and afford to buy whatever they want. If someone is buying you at 0.1 or $100 with an open edition, like every time someone puts aside money that they could be spending on food or, you know, anything, and chooses to use that money to buy work from you, like, it's just so wild to me, and we're so blessed.
I'm telling you, that was like, so I ran a little experiment, and I find that when I run experiments, when I put anything new I do in the name of an experiment, it's a lot easier for me to do it, versus like I need to try something new, or I learned that from an old colleague. Like when everything is a test, innovation is like the most present in all those moments, because like you're not there's no like defined goal, or there's no, I mean, there is
No
a defined goal.
expectations.
No expectations. Yeah. Like there's no shame. There's no guilt. There's no like anything that's supposed to happen or not happen, you know. But I took a lot of my very first episodes on from that I recorded from back in like 2019, where I was just like literally recording with a phone, and I had no agenda, I had no expectations, I had no motive. It was just like, can I do this, and do I want to do this? Can I do this consistently? And I actually took the first 7 episodes and I minted those on Tezos, because I was like, okay, like I want to like make it super accessible. I don't want to make it like feel like a super cash grab kind of thing. But I also want to see like what the sentiment is for people like that would want to own some of these. And like D's actually picked up all, like I haven't put a price on the first episode, but like he scooped up every single one of them, you know, like, and multiple of certain episodes. And like that was like a really cool feeling, where it's like, even though I know that he's got tons, like Tezos is just like, he just like yeets money out for Tezos NFTs, but it was still like this really cool thing that like he chose to do that, and like he chose to support that, and he chose to like really believe in what that stood for, you know, or that he saw value in like what I was doing there. You know what I mean? It's just a very different feeling.
Yeah, it translates a lot like more, I think, than people necessarily realize. I think that as we go on, we see more collectors who are experimenting with minting, and you know, sometimes just to experience what that feels like for themselves. And I think it's a great idea for collectors to mint and for artists to collect, just so that you can experience the thought process that and the
yes,
you know, the emotions that come with both sides of that journey. Because man, I really hope that every person who actively spends their time in this space collecting, whether it's an artist paying it forward with profits that they've made, or someone who's like a crypto native and has a lot of money to spend, like on every end of that spectrum, I really hope that people understand how much of an impact it has every time they decide to buy something, because it's really it's such a beautiful thing.
It is. And I'll tell you, like, speaking of perspective, like I gained a lot of respect for artists that put work out. Like when I started minting and going through the emotions and feelings of doing that, where it was like, oh my God, what price do I set? What are the drop mechanics? Like, what are the royalties? Like, how do I market this? Like, how do I, you know, like, how much is too much? Especially when it comes to marketing, like, do I just flood the DMs of people that like are a fan of the podcast? Do I not do that? Like, how much do I talk about it on Twitter before I get shadow banned? Right? Like, there's all these like things, like, when do I just shut the fuck up about it and let people discover it, or when do I just be really bullish on it, you know?
And it's hard to, that even just that last one is like, you can go down the whole rabbit hole with that, because the fact is it's your work and you are bullish on it, otherwise you wouldn't have minted it.
Right.
You're building a legacy on chain, and you don't want to shut the fuck up about it, because it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, there comes a point where maybe you should shut the fuck up about it, because everyone's seen it or heard about it, and not everyone, definitely not everyone.
Right.
Otherwise it'll probably be sold. But like, I know exactly what you mean. It's such a complex minefield of different strategies and different people telling you different things about what's best to do in this scenario. That is like how anyone comes into this space, and that, like, if you survive your first month in this space with all the different opinions that get thrown at you and all the different advice, and like you're just still here after a month regardless of what kind of cycle it is or anything like that, I think you should get like a POAB for surviving this minefield.
I made it a month. I get my participation trophy as a POAB for making it an NFT.
Someone needs to like we need like a head of NFT Twitter somehow. And they just need to like give out POABs for like a month, a year, We need to have like badges for survival.
I like the tangent that we went on, but like when it comes to like how you're approaching like this market versus the last one, like when it like actually one question I had here that I actually thought about before we chatted, and it's something that I've seen a few artists talked about. I've seen Alpha Centauri Kid talk about it. I've seen a few other people talk about it. Is artist supply, and it's like when you think of like your supply, like what is that? I guess what's your thought on that? What does that mean to you? And like, what does that mean to you? Is the better question.
It's one of those things that I kind of go back and forward with a little bit, I guess, every time I read, a thread that has really good points in it, because people do talk. It is something that people talk about often.
Yeah.
I think where I default to, like my thoughts on this are, if I walk into an artist's like personal gallery shopfront, I walk into their physical store, if you will, and they said, and I'm like, I really love your work, what can I buy? And they said, just this one. I think I'd be like, oh, okay. What if that one is out of their whole collection of work? What if just that one is like the one that least vibes with me? And I don't know. I just think imagine walking into that scenario and them only having one piece of work for sale, and then imagine saying to them, how much did all of these pieces sell for, and in what order? Because I want to be sure that each one has sold for more than the last. I need to be sure of that before I buy one. Or conversely, they say to me, well, this one sold for this amount, this one sold for this amount, and this one sold for this amount, and it's been 6 months since I sold one, but I need you to pay more for this one. It's just such a, if you translate it, I think, to a physical scenario, it changes my perspective on it, at least from what I see purely in Web3. And then I also like to think about artists who are operating purely in a Web2 space. I pay a lot of attention to a lot of them because, someone who's a painter and who sells prints of their paintings or the original paintings will put out maybe a new collection of work per month. And their valuation models are generally a little bit more reasonable, I think, than a bit more accessible, I think, than a lot of the valuation that happens in this space. But these people are able to make a sustainable living out of that sort of supply of very frequent and maybe low numbers, but quite low priced editions.
Yep.
And I think there's only one artist that I can think of in our space who is very frequently putting out editions, and I have not gone into enough of a deep dive to be able to say how well it's going for them. But I just think everyone needs to fucking stress less, to be honest. It's, the technology that we're building all of this on, I see it far more as building a lifelong and a lasting legacy than, and I was going to say this earlier about you minting your podcast, like what a foundation to be building your legacy on. It doesn't matter to me if they sell or not. It's not about that. It's great. I don't want to sound like an asshole. Everyone likes money and it's nice to have, and obviously it propels you in the space when people see that collectors of reputation are paying attention to you. But I think fundamentally the opportunity that we have to, everyone wants to be remembered for something.
Yeah.
And build those human connections. And I just think the opportunity that we have to do that with this technology, it seems like such a waste to me for people to be spending more of their time worrying about supply. And then I come back to the economics side of my brain and I'm like, yeah, but it's like a factor. It's a market. You have to consider it. and this is why I say I bounce back and forward, I think. But for me personally, I will tell you that I haven't had any work available on primary for an extended period of time, for quite a while, and it's not a matter of months usually that it's available. And I don't like that. It doesn't feel good to me.
Why so?
I stress that I have nothing. Like right now, I have nothing available on primary, and I'm very aware that there's heaps of secondary opportunities. If someone comes along and they're like, oh my god, I really want to collect some of May's work, heaps of secondary opportunities. And my DMs are open, and there's no reason for me to panic about them not being able to instantly gratify that desire to own my work. There's no reason for me to worry about it, but it just feels bad to me somehow that I don't have anything that someone can just go and buy from me.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure why, but at the same time, I'm not going to rush work and mint it just because of that feeling, because I'm building a legacy here. What I'm doing is really intentional, and I've got a lot of work that I've started and never finished, and that's fine.
Yeah, I like that answer. I mean, it was, because I've always thought about that, like, because I don't, as a collector, I haven't really given it a lot of like serious thought. I just know it's a lot of like, there's a lot, it pushes a lot of buttons. And so I know that I'm always curious, and it's nice hearing like a personal perspective from your end, because it helps me like take a deeper dive into it on my own, because like now I have like at least one perspective to go off. Like, it's kind of like when you discover like I don't really listen to new music unless someone recommends it to me. Like, it's like until you, it's almost like when that person recommends or gives their perspective, it like gives you permission, or like gives me permission to like go down that rabbit hole. But what I've also noticed is that like I've seen there be a difference in that conversation when it comes to photographers versus like illustrators, like versus like glitch, and like I feel like the conversation is different. It's almost like a subculture, like for each different art form, and like supply is a different conversation for each different type of artist. Because like I look at,
that is such a good point,
right? Like, have you like, because that just kind of like came to me, where it's like I noticed with photography that makes sense to have, like, to me it makes sense to have a lot of supply. Like, especially like you're traveling the world, like you're doing this really cool thing, and you're like documenting, like every like place that most people don't get to go. And so to me, like, but also there's people that kind of turn that on their head, like Ty and Kath, like they have historically very low supplies, and so, but they also have like their own unique thing that they do. So I don't know, and it's a really nuanced and weird conversation that like I don't think there's like a one size fits all, even though as humans we desperately try to bucket that. But I think it does matter, and I'm sure someone listening to this will take it personally, because this always pushes people's buttons. But like I do think that what I can say safely, as from someone who's just observed and not really dove into it, is that to me there is a difference like in the type of medium, and I think that each medium kind of like deserves to have their own kind of like discussion about that, if that makes sense, where it's like, okay, what works for photographers may not work for glitch, it may not work for illustration, it may not work for music, because you look at like music NFTs now, it's like, okay, like that's obviously completely fucking different than everything else. So
yeah, it is a really interesting and nuanced situation. I think you're right that perhaps each genre kind of deserves its own discussion around it, but I also think that from person to person, what worked for me is never going to be the exact recipe that works for someone else. And I say this pretty frequently to people who like sometimes I think get a little don't tell me what to do when if you say something on Twitter that's like, even hints at giving advice, which like fair enough. I'm glad that you don't want to be told what to do, but I'm never saying anything in a you need to go and do this, or this is best practice, or it's what's going to work well for you. But I think conviction in how you personally have come to the the strategy or the approach that you're going to take. Having conviction in that will help you when times get tough or things get turbulent. You can always just come back to your kind of thesis about how you're going to approach, how you're going to move through this space.
I like that. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think you hit, that's a really different, and that journey looks really different for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, even, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I remember when I first started a lot of this, it was like just casting the net far and wide and see what happens. Just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what stuck. But as what I'm realizing is that, like, the more consistent I am and the more I continue to show up and the more I continue to just participate, like, that net starts to, like, narrow a little bit. And I think to add on to your point, I think a lot of that has to do with, like, understanding what it is that you want, or, like, at least having an idea of, like, what you want. And because to me, without having an idea or an understanding of what you want, it's hard to really build conviction around how to get there, and, like, what strategy is going to work. And having, like, I guess, I'm sure the word will come to me, but right now I'm going to use, like, the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to where, like, if you fail, like, that's completely okay. And, like, it goes back to everything being a test and everything being an experiment. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work. But I think we oftentimes, and I struggle with this too, is that, like, the meme is like, we're building the plane as we're flying it, like, but everyone's kind of, like, on their own, like, journey. And I think this is just, like, my take, or, like, what I've come to in this conversation, is that the plane will build itself without us having to talk about how it's being built. Like, if all of us just kind of, like, do what we're supposed to do and take care of ourselves and figure out what that strategy is for what we want, like, I feel like the plane will naturally kind of just build itself without us having to have these, like, super divisive conversations.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true, but I hope it's true.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, because a lot of these conversations or trends, I don't know if they even were conversations, but situations we find ourselves in today, things like people chasing an all-time high on each sale, as an example.
Yeah.
And every time I see the conversation being had, I'm like, but where did it come from? Where did it start? Did someone once say you should be doing this? Or did people just start doing it and no one ever discussed it until it became a problem? And did we kind of fall into this pattern of, I don't know, it's hard. In that example, I think there was quite a few people who actually said you should never list a price for less than you last sold one, because it's a disservice to your most recent collector. I think that's exactly what happened in that scenario. But I think there's a lot of topics that we have heated sometimes discussions about, because we're so, the space is so new and we're building it. We the people in it are really making those. We're building the plane as we go, like you said. And for me, that means, like, that makes me feel like it's okay to just relax a little bit. Like, it's so early. There's no hard and fast rules. Like, everyone is winging it, and we're all winging it together. Just chill the fuck out. And I think there's other people who look at it like they have a social or a economic or a cultural responsibility to take it really seriously, how it gets built, and to impart some of their influence on how it gets built. And I think that that's good too. I don't know how anyone, gets to, like, picks what camp they end up being in. Maybe it's just how big your brain is. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I feel on one hand, I feel simultaneously, I suppose, on one hand, that we can all kind of chill out because it'll figure itself out. And on the other hand, I feel like there's a lot of people figuring it out in the background.
Right, but I also think that the second part, and I guess if I'm a little bit more honest around that take that I had. It's like, I think part of it's just like, it's scary to be involved in these conversations and kind of like putting a stake in the ground of like, this is what I believe, and going back to like having conviction in what is it you want to do. But we also have to do this in the conversations that we have when it comes to building this, because if you look at it, if you look at the ladder that you had mentioned about like a bunch of people just figuring it out and kind of just like being farts in the wind and like whatever happens, happens. I mean, that's great, but what if the meme is changing the narrative around, you know, self-sovereignty, around artists like being equitably paid and like different types of financial tools being more accessible to everybody? If all these things are supposed to happen, if we kind of just like, oh, we'll just figure it out, that to me sounds very much like what's happening right now, where a lot of people just don't want to be involved in the creation of building new things, or in the process of building new things. And we're like, oh, well, I'm just going to put that to someone else. That's kind of how we got into a lot of the situation that we're in.
I think you're totally right. The innovation and the, you know, the conversations that actually push the space forward.
Yeah.
If those didn't happen, I think it's fairly reasonable to say that we would be a primarily PFP market, and the conversations would just be shitposting. I don't even know if PFPs would have really done what they've done if we didn't have people who were, you know, someone like Pranksy who, you know, bought. I think he started with 1,000 apes and slowly sold them off and kind of helped that rise in price. I think, there's always key players when it comes to a new concept or an innovation or an idea, and you're right. There is a responsibility to be involved in that. But going back to what you said earlier, we're in this kind of cycle of washing out a lot of the noise, a lot of the extractive behavior, and hopefully what we get left with is a lot of people who are ready to contribute in their own way and what they can to moving us all forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of where my statement originally came from is that I think when it comes to a bull market, I was not interested in being any part of the conversations that were happening, because it's like, it was not attractive. There was no like desire to want to participate, you know, and it just seemed really like trying to figure out which ones were genuine and which ones weren't, and like which I think probably the problem that I think I see on top of like just the fear of like, this is what I believe, or like this is what, you know, how I think things should be done, and having like a discourse about it is that like when we have these conversations, like when you see the same one come up multiple times, it's like, okay, we have these, but it's hard to like see the immediate effect of that conversation. Like why, you know, like when we spent all this time arguing and bickering and talking about this shit, like I guess it's just hard to see the result of that. Yeah, did we actually get anywhere? And it's kind of hard to like put your time into something that you don't really see something immediately happen. You know, like if I spend my money like on a piece of art, like it goes right to my wallet. You know, like if I don't know, conversations and change take a lot of time, and I think that's it's a hard concept when everything is like up only and time is completely warped, and like, you know, so many events happen per day, and like we're kind of just like figuring this all out. It's hard to see how the change happens.
Yeah, I think you're really right about that.
I don't know, it's a interesting topic.
It is, and there's a lot of it encompasses a lot. I think, you know, it's something that you could come back to and have discussion after discussion about. But I think, you know, that I often get frustrated about it because it feels like there's no solution at the end of a lot of those conversations, to your point. But to your other point, change takes time, and we don't really need to be in a rush, I don't think, other than like the institutions coming for our JPEGs. I don't know if there's anything like that's immediately an enormous threat to you know, forcing us to be rushing a lot of these things. I think we've got time to figure a lot of this stuff out, and until then, not farts in the wind, but we can wing it a little bit.
Yeah, we can. I think so. It takes a little bit of that. I mean, that's part of the fun in it all. I'm kind of like, and I want to know what I'll ask you this as well. Like, I think what I'm more excited about is like kind of like what's going to kick off the next like run. Like, what does that look like? What does mass adoption look like? Like, I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of talks about like infrastructure where it's like, okay, it's not necessarily like this like fake utility that people keep promising with everything that they put together, but it's like decentralized social media platforms, or like how do people like token gate content and things that like transient labs are doing, like when it comes to like dynamic NFTs and like different types of things you can do with the code. That to me is like the more interesting part. I'm also interested in seeing like, okay, we have these like digital identity layers, and it's like, okay, now what do we do with them, right? Like, what are the tools that allow these things to come to life? And I think people will start to see those in a lot of different light, because it becomes more than just like a static image. It becomes something that becomes a part of who you are and what you do and what you create moving forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I really see it in two different, maybe three different sections, our whole market. One is PFPs, and I see PFPs, don't tell the SEC, but I see them very much like securities. Like, and I think a lot of people do. Like, it's the gambling side of things. It's where, it's about trading. It's about moving things around, and it's about flipping. Even if you have conviction and you hold something for very long before you flip it, it's about the profit. Art is arguably a little bit more convoluted than that. There's a profit-taking side of it, but there's also a lot more. There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more conversations. There's a lot more things to be done and different approaches. And then there's the builders who, spend all of their time trying to bring innovation and education to the masses, to the rest of us. I don't know that any one of those things individually kicks off another bull run. I don't know that. Do you remember when we thought that? I think we were mid bull cycle, and we thought we had the audacity to think that Coinbase NFT
Oh my god.
was going to be mass adoption. We were like, we're in the thick of a bull run, but we want more. Coinbase NFT, will you bring that to us?
I've got thoughts on that.
Narrator, no, it did not.
No, it did not. I got a thought on that. Like, I feel like it could have happened, and I'll tell you why. Like, I feel like this is my complete outside perspective of like how they did this. They spent all of their time trying to market to us. Like, that's the fucking problem. Like, they did not spend, like, because what's going to kick off the next bull run is people coming in to buy our bags, is essentially what that means, right? Like, what's going to be the thing that causes people to come in and buy our bags? We are not going to be causing the next thing. Like, we're not going to be making it larger, because we already have everything we need. Even though some of it's janky and it's broken and like it's bad UI, like it works. Like, it obviously works because there's millions being transacted. But it's like, what about the people who don't own JPEGs or tokens that point to JPEGs? Like, what about the people that just own tokens? What about the people that don't even own tokens? Like, those are the people we need to come in, because there's probably a big chunk of Coinbase where people, they just have it in Coinbase and that's it. Why not market to those people? You know what I mean? And like, ask them, and maybe like, instead of trying to market to us, like maybe have this like thing where it's like, okay, what is it that we need to market to the masses? It's like, use us as like guinea pigs for like product feedback and research and like insights of like what we liked and what we think could work, because we're the ones who are fucking building it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you do that, then you can like target, the mass adoption, or, the people that don't, have JPEGs. I don't know. That's just like my thought on that. Like, I feel like they had every opportunity to do it, but I feel like somewhere they fucked up. I don't know where that conversation went different way. I don't know. yeah, but that was like to me, a big whiff by Coinbase.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you're right. I think it's on them that they kind of failed to. I mean, it may not have been a great thing if it did happen anyway, considering that I can't think what month they launched, but considering that not long after that, the real economic downturn globally started, maybe a lot of people would have onboarded and then immediately jumped off. And maybe if the onboarding event, whatever it ends up being, is closer to something like the Big Beeple sale when, from there it continued to be up. If it was a drop off a cliff immediately after an onboarding event, I don't think it would be very good for us long term. I mean, maybe they come back, but we'll see.
Yeah. You could also look at it as like it's not who Coinbase is.
Yeah.
They may have had no business in making an NFT platform to begin with, and they could have allocated those resources into what they do best. You know what I mean? Making crypto accessible and to like the everyday average user. Like they have nailed that. Like it's so like that's how I first was onboarded to crypto, is through fucking Coinbase. Like it is so easy to do that. Like they're obviously some of their updates have made things harder to find, but like essentially, like that is the tool that most people hear about when they think of crypto, like that when they haven't heard of anything else before.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that they had something like 2 million people sign up for their NFT marketplace, like early access list, I think. And so that was, everyone kind of thought, wow, that's like a lot of people who are going to be coming from the Coinbase crypto native side of things. And that's going to be fantastic onboarding. But yeah, I think it just flopped.
Yeah, it's like, what do you I mean, yeah, and there's a lot of reasons. Yeah, I feel like, because I remember when they had the VP of product on like NFT Now's podcast, and I remember when they were interviewing him, I was like, this sounds bullish. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is, now granted, again, I didn't know what a bull market was. I didn't know what a bear market was. So like, this was just, I'm like, yo, everything sounds great. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah. I think generally, like a lot of things around that time, though, I think, even people who were, there were people who were definitely cautious and who expected a downturn in the future. But I don't know that anyone knew when it was going to happen. And I think that a lot of people who would usually be more level-headed about it got caught in that up-only mentality.
Yeah.
I don't think that you were anything close to alone being excited about something that sounded like it was going to maybe bring a lot of people in or pump our bags. I don't know. All of that, like everything at that point in time, it was like, just we really had a one track. I'm talking about it like it's the good old days. It's like, 6 months ago. Talking like we're having a conversation like we're actually old people sitting on our Web3 porch, and we're veterans of like this roller coaster of life.
I mean, in the Mayverse.
And it's been like 3 months.
Yeah. Maybe next time we do this, we can have one in the Mayverse, and have a digital cup of coffee, and reminisce.
Yeah. That sounds fucking delightful.
Right? I mean, for real, like low key, that sounds pretty great, because it's just comfy and soft, and it's easy to think about, like it's easy to think about that.
It is. I mean, I go build us some like real big comfy hills to roll down.
Sounds like a delight. Yeah.
I was going to ask you earlier. Okay, so very quickly, I'll actually make sure that I answer your question this time. My strategy with this market is to chill the fuck out and see what happens and contribute where I think it's important for me to contribute and have important conversations and continue with onboarding where I can. But other than that, my strategy is chill the fuck out.
I like that.
And just keep going, because I don't, like, I wake up every day and I make art, and that's not going to change regardless of who's buying it or who's not buying it. So chill the fuck out.
Cool.
What's your strategy?
Mm, I think it's actually very similar to yours, is that I did not I did not touch enough grass. Um, I really didn't.
Admitting it is the first step.
I mean, I'm one to know, right? Um, yeah, this became, and I don't say this through like a regretful lens, because I genuinely think that like I needed to have this mentality to like push myself to get to where I am today. But I feel like now I'm in a position of privilege where it's like, you know what? Maybe let's rethink some strategies around the frequency of people that come onto the podcast. Let's start thinking about ways to monetize the podcast, because I was like really like dying on this hill of like I'm never going to have any advertisers, and like I don't believe in that, and I'm not, and I think there's an advantage to that. And I think like I don't want to sell, like I want essentially anything that I would promote on here to be something that I would use myself, and something that's relevant to the people that listen, because I just can't stand listening to a podcast where the advertisement has nothing to do with like anything. Like it's like you can tell it
Yeah.
was like you got $5 to peddle this shit. You know what I mean?
What in a way where you have to be strategic about it to be able to make money. It's for things like this, right? It's so that you can make the experience better for people who are consuming the content that you're creating. And it's the same for me. Like if I make money from my art, at the moment there's one of two things that happens with it. I use it to buy other people's art, or I spend it on software or course to make my work better. So I think the whole like chill the fuck out strategy is also you've got to be reasonable about it and get yourself in a position where you.
It's the reality is that it's like super prideful to like not like do that. You know what I mean? It's actually like really selfish to like not do that. And I'm starting to like have these like epiphanies of like how that all works, and what selfish means, and what, just working for myself means, and what it means to like ask for money. Like there's that was also part of like the experiment of like, like monetizing or tokenizing the podcast, is like, okay, is there an interest for this, right? Is there like, do people see value in this, and that was like my first test. And it's like, okay, well, that answer's a yes, because everything sold out, so I'm like, okay, cool, like what is that? Because I think where I got super hung up, and I just didn't have either the confidence, or I didn't have the experience, or the knowledge, or just the self-awareness, but like I want to like use Web3 tools to monetize it. That's like what I wanted to do. And I just, up until this point, I didn't see it. I just didn't see how that was going to work. And I was like, to me, it was almost like I was holding off until like things got quiet, where I actually had some time to like think about how this would actually work, versus like, I don't want to do something Web 2 in Web 3 armor, right? You know what I mean? Where it's like, it appears to be Web 3, but it's the same shit. So part of it's me overthinking it and like taking it way too seriously. But the other side of it is like, no, I want to like actually pave the way, or like to be one of the people that are early.
Yeah, and you want to do it well.
Yeah, and I want to do it well, but I also want to be an example for like how people can like genuinely monetize their platform, because as much as music is under monetized, podcasting's worst. Like, so it's like it's the two most under monetized pieces of content when you look at like things that we consume. So like that to me is like, okay, that's this problem. How do I do this in a different way where it can like help onboard the next mass of people that like want to pursue this profession, and they can like do it in a meaningful way that gives a lot of value back to their community on top of the value they already do provide. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think it's like, it might be entirely intimidating to be kind of pilgrimaging that journey and figuring out what that looks like. But it's also a beautiful opportunity that you have to pioneer something
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I can't, that was part of the challenge too, is like, I'm looking for a model to base this off of, and I just don't have it. Like everything that I want to do, people are just doing the Web 2 and Web 3 they're just doing the same thing as they were in the past. They're just, branding it differently. So yeah, you're right. It's very intimidating, but I'm starting to get to the point where I'm past the intimidation phase. And it's like, okay, like I actually have the opportunity to be like either the first or one of the first to do this. And like, I actually have the opportunity to set standard to allow people to follow, or to allow people to build on, I don't necessarily follow, but like take what I do and do
Make it
something
better.
fucking cool, make it better.
Yeah.
Right. Do
I
something
read
cool.
something the other day. I can't think whether I read it or heard it or anyway. Some way this came into my brain. And it was like, I feel like it was Grant said it in an interview. And he was, I chose to do this. I started doing this. So how can I be scared or intimidated by all the things that are happening as a result of me choosing to do this? It struck a chord for me because I think in a lot of people there's a fear of success in a lot of ways. Things start getting too big, too intimidating, too heavy, and we start to kind of go, oh, whether it's I don't know if I deserve this, or if it's this is too much, or I don't have time. Like we start to build excuses and put up barriers for ourselves to leading into that success. But I think what he said resonated because sure, I didn't come into this thinking that I would run into every success in the world and be the next X copy, but why would that mean that I should put up any barriers to receiving any of those successes? We put so much of ceiling on ourselves sometimes.
You struck a chord that like I've constantly struggled with, that where it's like the fear of success is almost outweighs the fear of failure.
Fully.
And it's such a mind fuck to like think about that. I remember when someone first had me like write out do some like journaling around the fear of like being successful, and I remember thinking like, what the fuck, like that doesn't,
like, how is that a thing? Yeah,
how is that a thing? But I think you're absolutely right, and it is an absolute mindfuck because I think everyone has that within. Everyone has that like desire to like be super successful, but like there's this, I don't know, a lot of it I think has to do with a lot of how we, at least for me, around some of the models that we had for like what success looked like, and us and having in my models looking different, or like me wanting something different than that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like what did success look like 20 to 25 years ago versus what does it look like today? Because you have all of these different factors. Like technology has played a huge impact of, can you even be successful to the way you want to be, because like 25 years ago, that was not, a lot of the opportunities today just did not flat out exist. And so I think that plays a huge role where like, now I'm kind of stepping into this where it's like, oh wow, like now just even the mere existence of the internet like has created so much opportunity that just never existed before. And it's a really big internet. I think it's really easy to feel like there's just not enough room. There's just not enough space.
Or that you're not the one to fill it.
Right. Exactly. That I'm like, why me? Trust me, like with my past, like I've constantly like asked that, like, why me? Like why, like there's so many other people that did just as much work as I did, but they didn't make it. Right. Like there's so many people that it's a very like, I think it's a natural human emotion, but especially when you tie it to like some of these big flagpole like things in life, it just amplifies everything. And it makes it's impactful on like a much broader scale than I think it really needs to be, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We take things like that, I think, far more seriously and with a lot more weight than we need to. And that's why I go back to like my strategy in this market is like build, sure, but chill the fuck out, because
Yeah.
so much unneeded stress.
Yeah, I mean, and going back, if I'm looking at it from more of like from like a collection perspective, like this is the most I've ever collected.
Yeah.
Since I've started, and a lot of the art that I'm buying, it helps me make sense of like what I'm walking through. That's what I try to tie it to. But I think also what I'm really looking at right now, and I think this is probably the main thing that I'm really trying to understand, is that like why I'm buying it, and like am I buying it because of mimetic desire, or am I buying it because I really want it? You know, am I buying it because there's a lot of hype around it? Or am I buying it because it's actually made a difference? Because I bought art purely off mimetic desire because it was like the hype train thing to do. But then recently I bought a piece from Austin Visual, a great photographer that I've been following for a long time. And that one piece, initially when he dropped, so it's funny, initially when he dropped that collection, I was like super hard FOMOing into it, and I couldn't afford it. And like I had this piece selected, I'm like, okay, this is the one I want. But then I just never had the ETH to do so. But then I finally had the money to do so. There was only 4 pieces in the collection left. And there was one piece that I completely overlooked. And it resonated with me on a level that I've never had in photography before. And I was like, holy shit. Maybe like we don't buy into things when they're super hyped, because we may miss out on the piece that we actually need, or that we actually like truly desire to have in our collection. I think unpacking the reasons behind buying has been something that, if I was to tie a bow on all of this, like is like that's like really what I'm mainly focusing on, because I'm buying.
I think that's great. Everything slowing down gives everyone a chance to slow down, and slowing down means that you can focus on things like that, which I think is fantastic. I'm glad to hear that you're using the opportunity in a way that on the other side of this will make all of it more meaningful for you.
Yeah, because then when things do go up only and bananas and crazy, as they inevitably will, you know, like number one, I will have accumulated a great fucking collection of art that means a lot to me, that I really took my time to buy. But it also, I think it's going to strengthen my decision making when things do go like insane again. You know,
and teach you about yourself as well. I think like as you get to know though, like each and every why you're drawn to a particular piece, or the story that you kind of interpret from that piece, I think there's not a real opportunity to learn a lot about yourself as well.
Sorry, I had a cough there. Yeah, it's been fun, and it's been nice to be able to like slow down and really just analyze that, and it's become a lot more like meaningful of a process. And I say this thing that I'm like, I don't have the money to do it yet, but something I'm like looking towards is like, I know Sotheby's and Christie's have a bunch of like art courses, and I know I saw one of my friends, Declan, enrolling one. And I'm like, yo, that would be really cool. Be studied. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good tool to have in your particular toolbox. I think you're from my perspective, you're very well spoken and have a really good broad knowledge about the space and the mechanics of it and what kind of makes it run. But I think, going further into the art side of things, which means studying historical references and just getting a better understanding, because I think the course that Declan was doing was an art marketing, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think, but I haven't had a look at what the variations in courses are that they offer at like Sotheby's, etc. But I think anything on that line of education where you can kind of bring yourself more into the why and the how, and how things have run historically, is going to allow you specifically to have, all of us, but you specifically, to have much more in-depth conversations with the people who are creating that art and what it's going to mean historically, and you'll have a different understanding, I guess, which is cool. I would also love to have that understanding. Sometimes I look at my work and I'm like, oh, like my art education is incredibly minimal. I just make things that look good to me, and then I'll like go and do a short course on like composition or something like that, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, that thing makes sense. I do that, but just because it looks good, not because I knew that technically it was like a concept, you know?
But I also think that speaks a lot to like just the natural ability that you came in here with. Like you do it because it feels good. There's probably a reason why it feels good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah, like that's kind of how there's been things that I approach and it just because it feels good, but it turns out that that's like if you were to do it a right way, or if there was a right way, or if there was a better way to do it, that's usually it, because like it felt good. Like when I do things because it just feels right, you know, there's typically a reason behind that, and I don't really know it while I'm making it. You know, like I don't understand why I'm making the decision I am at the time I'm doing it, but sometimes when I reflect back, it's like, oh, well, that makes complete sense. So I think it's like a nod to me of your like just if I'm gonna toot your own horn a little bit, you know, like just like some of the natural creativity that you were born with, where it's like you just did it because it felt good, but it turns out that was like if you were to do it a proper way, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but yeah, I was actually gonna ask like if you had like, because I know from our last conversation, you had like collected a lot of like physical art. You know, so it's like, is there any style of like physical art that you collect the most, like where maybe that you already have a natural interest in?
They're all landscapes, bar one. I have one that's a still life. But yeah, they've always been landscapes, and the ones that I collect have this. If there's a thread that ties them together, it's that they are quite dreamy. Like there's a lot of very like soft pink skies and very fluffy. Like it now that you've asked me to describe what I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, this is making some sense, because yeah, the common thread that ties them together is they're Australian artists over, you know, however long. I usually find them in thrift stores. These are like original paintings that someone has maybe died and no one in their family wanted it, and so it was donated. And they're just I'm gonna show you one of them, because I can't. It's one of those things that you can't like I can't properly articulate how I feel when I look at this, and it's this one specifically, right?
Yeah. Is that tree, because it may be a little grainy on the quality of just the connection, but is that like a dead tree? Is that kind of like in the transition of like a fall to winter kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. There is some foliage, but not a lot. And like the water with these soft reflections, it's just, I think it really encapsulates everything that I love about landscape art. And I just think the fact that I found so many of these beautiful pieces of art in thrift stores that have been donated because no one wanted to have that hanging on their wall. And I think that the more I look at thrift stores, the more of these incredible landscapes that I see, and it just makes me really sad. Like I feel like it's an underappreciated subject.
I do too.
Not so much in photography though. There's a lot of landscape photographers that are incredible, but for paintings and stuff, you know.
Oh, got it. So it's like specifically into paintings. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't. No, I do own a couple of prints from photographers that I love, but I haven't got them out. They're all stored.
Gotcha. But you know what's really one thing I thought of when you showed me that painting and you were like where you got them, it was again, there was a lot of things I could draw from our last conversation, but it was like this idea of like having like it's like changing the way people look at like the dollar value assigned to art. You know what I mean? And it's like, this cost you maybe a couple bucks because it was in the thrift store. The beauty doesn't really always have a necessary correlation to the price that's put on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I couldn't tell you how many times I've sat in front of that and some of the other paintings that I own and just go into like a trance almost, because they I'm literally trying not to cry talking about it. I don't know. I can't articulate what it is, but there's something so powerful to me about being able to, the natural world that we live in. I think it's to do with the fact that we live in a time where society is so, DK. Did you see that DK piece where the guy was like staring at his phone and it was all dark, and then he looks up and everything becomes colourful and beautiful? I think it's that. I think it's exactly that. We just don't pay attention anymore.
You're right. I think this is a good way to start wrapping things up. It's been 2 hours. It's awesome.
I think it says a lot that we can just and there's so many topics that you can go on a deep dive into, but I think it says a lot that we can just so easily have a 2-hour conversation about it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do the podcasting thing and have you shamelessly plug yourself. Where can people find you? Where are you the most active?
Definitely most active on Twitter. I think from there you can kind of find everything else. There's links to my website and marketplaces and